The dust hung thick over the market square in Bellstone, coating everything in a fine layer of red grit that turned the morning sun into a hazy copper disk. The smell of horse sweat and unwashed bodies mixed with the acrid smoke from the saloon across the street, where laughter spilled out like broken glass, sharp and dangerous. Clara stood on the makeshift platform, her bare feet burning against the splintered wood. The rope around her wrists was old and frayed, cutting into her skin with each movement. She kept her eyes down, watching the shadows of the crowd shift and merge in the dust below. Somewhere in that mass of indifference, someone was counting coins, weighing her worth like a sack of grain. Thrown out, just like Papa did. The words escaped her lips in a whisper, swallowed by the auctioneer's booming voice. Harlan Coyle stood beside her, his hand heavy on her shoulder, fingers digging in whenever she swayed. His breath reeked of whiskey and tobacco, and his voice carried the false cheer of a man selling damaged goods. Strong girl here, folks 12 years old, good for kitchen work, laundry, whatever needs doing, no family to come looking, no troubles to follow, starting at $20. The crowd stirred like vultures around carrion. Men in dusty coats appraised her with calculating eyes, while the few women present turned away, clutching their shawls tighter. Clara had seen this dance before in other towns, with other children. The law might have words written on paper somewhere about buying and selling people, but out here, paper meant nothing. Out here, might made right, and money made might. 25, called a voice from the back. Clara recognized the speaker, the owner of the Broken Wheel Saloon. A man whose establishment was known for working girls who aged too fast and disappeared too often. Her stomach clenched. She'd heard the whispers, seen the hollow eyes of girls not much older than herself stumbling out of such places at dawn. Better to run now, she thought, but where the desert stretched endlessly in every direction, and a child alone would be buzzard food within days. 30, another bid. This time from a rancher with cruel eyes and hands that twitched toward his belt too often. Then, cutting through the noise like a blade through cloth, came footsteps slow, deliberate, heavy. The crowd parted, and Clara glimpsed a man approaching the platform. He wore a weathered hat pulled low over his eyes, and his clothes spoke of hard work rather than prosperity. Theodore Thatcher Reed moved with the careful grace of someone who'd learned that sudden movements often led to gunfire. He stopped at the platform's edge and looked up not at Harlan, but at Clara. For the first time that morning, someone was seeing her as more than merchandise. "This ends now," Thatcher said, his voice carrying despite its quiet tone. Harlan laughed, a sound like rattling bones. "You bidding? Reed didn't figure you for the type to need help around that dried-up ranch of yours." Thatcher reached into his coat, and several hands in the crowd drifted toward hidden weapons, but he pulled out only a leather pouch, heavy with coin. "I'm not bidding. I'm ending this. The girl comes with me." "That's not how auctions work, friend." Harlan's voice hardened. "You want her. You bid fair and square. Nothing fair or square about selling children." Thatcher tossed the pouch at Harlan's feet. "That's $50. More than you'd get from these jackals. Take it and untie her." The crowd murmured, some in disappointment, others in curiosity. This wasn't following the script they knew. In Bellstone, you didn't interrupt commerce, especially not Harlan Coyle's commerce. Harlan's face darkened, but the weight of the pouch was undeniable. $50 was good money. Better than he'd likely get from the crowd. Still, his pride wrestled with his greed. "She's mine fair and bought. I got papers." "Papers." Thatcher said the word like it tasted foul. "Show them to the devil when you meet him. Untie the girl." Something in his tone made even Harlan step back. This wasn't the voice of a man making threats. It was the voice of someone stating facts, like commenting on the weather. In the West, such men were the most dangerous kind. Grudgingly, Harlan cut the rope. Clara's hands fell to her sides, numb and tingling. She stood frozen, unsure whether this was salvation or simply a change in captors. "Come on down, girl," Thatcher said, extending a hand. "Slow and easy. No need to rush." Clara looked at the hand, calloused, steady, patient. After a long moment, she placed her smaller hand in his and let him help her down from the platform. The crowd began to disperse. The show over, their entertainment curtailed. As they turned to leave, a woman burst from the bakery across the square, flour still dusting her apron. Ruth Harrison Warwidow, bread maker, and owner of the sharpest tongue in 3 counties, marched toward them with the determination of a cavalry charge. "Theodore Reed," she called out, causing half the remaining crowd to stop and stare. "You missed breakfast again? I made those biscuits you favor, and now they're cold as a banker's heart." Thatcher actually flushed slightly beneath his hat brim. "Miss Ruth, I had business." "Business?" She looked at Clara, then at Harlan counting his coins, and her expression shifted from annoyance to understanding. "I see. Well then, both of you look like you could use a meal. Come along." The domesticity of the moment, a woman scolding about missed breakfast in the middle of what had nearly been a slave auction, struck Clara as so absurd, she almost laughed. Some in the crowd did chuckle, assuming they were witnessing a family spat. "We need to get going," Thatcher said quietly. "Long ride ahead." Ruth nodded, her eyes serious despite her light tone. She pressed a wrapped bundle into his hands. "Cornbread and dried beef. That girl needs meat on her bones." She looked at Clara with a mixture of pity and anger, not at the child, but at the world that had brought her to this moment. "You take care. Honey, Mr. Reed here, he's good people. Stubborn as a mule and about as talkative, but good people." They left the square with Harlan's eyes burning into their backs. Clara walked between Thatcher and his horse, her bare feet leaving small prints in the dust. As they passed the general store, Thatcher stopped. "Wait here," he told Clara, tying his horse to the post. He emerged minutes later with a small bundle. "Sit." Clara sat on the store's step, and he knelt before her, pulling out a pair of small boots. They were plain but new, the leather still stiff. He helped her put them on, careful not to hurt her raw feet. "Other foot," he said when she put the left boot on her right foot. They both almost smiled almost. The road out of Bellstone stretched before them like a ribbon of dust and possibility. Thatcher walked beside his horse, letting Clara set the pace. The landscape opened up sagebrush and mesquite, red rocks and endless sky. Buzzards circled lazily overhead, and the morning's heat was already building toward afternoon's furnace. They walked in silence for the first hour, Clara learning the feel of shoes, Thatcher seeming content with quiet. Finally, as they stopped to rest in the shade of a large boulder, he spoke. "Name's Theodore Reed. Most call me Thatcher. You got a name besides girl?" "Clara," she said, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Just Clara." "Well, just Clara. We've got about a day's ride to my place. We'll camp tonight, reach the ranch tomorrow. You know how to ride." She shook her head. "That's fine. You'll ride, I'll walk. Horse needs the break anyway, getting old. Like me." As he helped her onto the saddle, Clara found her voice again. "Why?" He looked up at her, understanding the weight of that single word. Why save her? Why spend $50 on a stranger? Why risk Harlan's wrath? "Because," he said simply, "somebody should have a long time ago." They continued on as the sun climbed higher, casting short shadows on the trail. Behind them, Bellstone grew smaller until it was just another speck in the vast expanse of desert. Ahead lay uncertainty, but for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara felt something that might have been hope. The West was hard country, unforgiving as hammered iron, but sometimes, in the midst of all that hardness, you found something else, a moment of grace, a hand extended, a chance to be more than what the world tried to make you. As Clara gripped the saddle horn and felt the steady pace of the horse beneath her, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd found such a moment. The memories came at night, when the desert wind whistled through the canyon walls and shadows danced like ghosts across the sand. Clara lay by the dying fire, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of horse and leather, watching Thatcher tend to the coffee pot. She didn't mean to remember, but the darkness brought them anyway, fragments sharp as broken glass. Her mother, Dolores, had called her mi mariposa, my butterfly. Clara remembered fingers gentle in her hair, braiding it with a red ribbon saved from better times. The ribbon meant freedom, her mother said, because butterflies were free to fly wherever they wished. Then came the night when men arrived with papers and promises of work opportunities back east. Dolores had fought, but papers meant law, and law meant nothing when you were poor and foreign and female. The last image, her mother being led away, the red ribbon falling to the floor, trampled under heavy boots. Clara had been 7 then. The orphanage came next, then the workhouse, then worse places where children learned to be silent to survive. Each move took her further west, further from any hope of finding Dolores again. "Can't sleep." Thatcher's voice pulled her back to the present. He wasn't looking at her, focused instead on pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. Clara sat up, accepting the cup he offered. The coffee was bitter and strong, but the warmth felt good against her palms. "Don't sleep much," she admitted. "That'll change," he said, settling back against his saddle. "Ranch work tires a body out proper. You'll sleep like the dead." He caught himself, grimacing at his choice of words. "You'll sleep sound?" They sat in companionable silence, the fire crackling between them. "Finally," Clara asked, "you got family?" Thatcher was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Had a wife once, Mary. Fever took her 5 winters back, no children." He paused, then added quietly, "Lost one before it could draw breath. Mary never quite recovered from that." "I'm sorry." "Long time ago," but his voice said otherwise. "What about you before Harlan?" Clara shrugged, a gesture meant to deflect. But something in the darkness, in the steady presence of this quiet man, made truth easier. Mama worked in a factory, Boston first, then Denver. Men came one night, said she had to go work somewhere else. Said I'd be cared for. She took another sip of coffee. They lied. Thatcher nodded slowly. They usually do. She had a red ribbon, Clara continued, surprising herself. Said it meant freedom. I kept looking for it after she left, thinking if I found it, she'd come back. She laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Stupid. Not stupid, hopeful. There's a difference. The fire popped, sending sparks up toward the star-scattered sky. In the distance, a coyote howled, answered by another, then another, until the night filled with their wild song. Why didn't you bid? Clara asked suddenly. Back there. Why not just bid like the others? Thatcher considered his words carefully. Because you're not property. Bidding would have said you were. Sometimes a man has to draw a line. Say, this thing is wrong, even if the whole world thinks otherwise. But you still paid him. Practical matters. Harlan's mean as a snake and twice as vindictive. The money bought us time to get clear. Man like him, he'll stew on it, maybe come looking for trouble later. But for now, we're free to go. Clara studied him across the fire. In the flickering light, she could see the lines etched by sun and sorrow. The careful way he held himself, a man who'd learned caution through pain. You ever kill anyone? The question hung in the air like smoke. Thatcher's jaw tightened. Yes. Was it hard? The killing, no. Living with it after, that's the hard part. He met her eyes. Why you asking? Just wondering if I had to. Pray you never find out. He stood, checking the horizon out of habit. But if the time comes when it's you or them, you do what you must to survive. Then you live with it. That's the bargain. They reached the ranch late the next afternoon. After a day of traveling through landscape that shifted from red rock to scrub prairie, the buildings appeared like a mirage. A low wooden house with a sagging porch, a barn that leaned slightly eastward, and a windmill that creaked arthritically in the breeze. It wasn't much, but the fences were mended and the water trough was full. Someone cared for this place. "Home," Thatcher said simply, helping Clara down from the horse. A yellow dog emerged from under the porch, tail wagging cautiously. "That's Jonah. He's particular about strangers, but he'll warm up." Clara stood in the yard, taking it in. After so many temporary places, so many rooms where she wasn't wanted, the permanence of it felt foreign. "Where do I sleep?" "Got a room off the kitchen. Was going to be—" He stopped. "It's yours now. Come on, I'll show you." The house was simple but clean. A main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a proper stove, 2 bedrooms. He led her to the smaller one, barely bigger than a pantry but with a window that looked out toward the mountains. A narrow bed with a quilt, a wooden box for belongings, hooks on the wall for clothes. "It's not much," Thatcher began, but Clara was already touching the quilt, running her fingers over the careful stitches. "It's mine," she whispered. "Yours." She sat on the bed, testing its solidity. "What are the rules?" "Rules? Every place has rules." "What are yours?" Thatcher leaned against the doorframe, considering. "See work that needs doing. Do it. Too tired to work. Rest. Nobody gets hurt for making mistakes. Nobody goes hungry. That's about it." Clara waited for more the real rules, the ones that came with consequences. When nothing came, she asked, "That's all?" "That's all. Oh, and Saturday nights we go to town for supplies. You can come or stay, your choice." "What if I run away?" "Door's not locked, but I hope you'll stay. Place could use some life in it again." That first night in a real bed. Clara lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Safety Jonah's claws on the porch boards, the windmill's rhythm, Thatcher's footsteps as he checked the doors before bed. No shouting, no breaking glass, no footsteps she needed to fear. She thought of her mother's ribbon and wondered if this counted as freedom. Not the flying away kind, but the landing kind, finding a place to rest your wings without fear of nets or cages. As sleep finally took her, she whispered into the darkness the name she'd been trying on in her mind all day. Clara Reed. Morning came with sunlight through clean glass and the smell of bacon. Thatcher was already at the stove when she emerged, moving with the easy efficiency of long practice. "Morning," he said without turning. "Eggs are in the basket there if you want to learn how to cook 'em." And so began the slow process of becoming human again. Clara learned the satisfaction of work that mattered, feeding chickens who clucked their appreciation, drawing water that would sustain life, mending fences that kept the world ordered. Her hands, soft from inactivity, grew calloused. Her body, thin from poor food, began to fill out. Ruth visited 3 days later, bringing salt, flour, and her characteristic sharp humor. She took one look at Clara's tangled hair and declared it a crime against nature. An hour later, Clara sat with neatly braided hair, feeling Ruth's gentle hands working out the knots with patience she hadn't experienced since Dolores. "You settling in?" Ruth asked, tying off the braid. Clara nodded, still not used to kindness without price. "Good. Thatcher needs someone around here. Man talks to his horse more than humans. Though between you and me, the horse probably gives better advice than most folks in town." As the days passed, Clara began to understand the rhythm of this new life. Dawn meant chores. Afternoon brought lessons, how to handle a gun safely, how to read the weather, how to tell when a horse was sick or scared. Evening meant quiet companionship. Thatcher reading week-old newspapers while Clara practiced her letters in the dirt with a stick. "You know your letters?" he asked one evening, noticing her scratching in the dust. "Some Mama taught me before—" She stopped. "Before." The next day, a slate and chalk appeared on the kitchen table. No explanation, just there, waiting for her use. That was Thatcher's way seeing needs and filling them without fanfare or expectation of gratitude. But the past doesn't release its hold easily. Some nights, Clara woke gasping from dreams of dark rooms and reaching hands. Once, Thatcher found her pressed into the corner of her room, eyes wide with remembered terror. "Just a dream," he said softly, lighting the lamp. "You're safe." "They found me," she whispered. "In the dream, they always find me." "Dreams lie," he said simply. "Truth is what's real. This room is real. That door locks from the inside, you control it. I'm real, and I'm not going anywhere. That's truth." Slowly, her breathing steadied. "Truth," she repeated, testing the word. "That's right. Now, how about some warm milk used to help Mary when she couldn't sleep?" As Clara followed him to the kitchen, she noticed he walked carefully, making noise so she could track his movements. Such small considerations. But they rebuilt her world brick by brick, proof that not all adults meant harm, that kindness could exist without conditions. Outside, the desert wind picked up, rattling the windows. But inside, the house stood firm, a shelter against more than just weather. Clara was learning what home meant, one careful day at a time. The rhythm of ranch life settled over Clara like a well-worn blanket. Each dawn brought the same comforting routine: feed the chickens while they pecked around her feet, draw water from the well with arms growing stronger each day, mend whatever had broken in the night. The smell of hay clung to her clothes, and dirt lived permanent under her fingernails. She had never been cleaner in her soul. Thatcher taught without seeming to teach. "Hold the hammer closer to the head for better control," he'd say, demonstrating on a fence post. Or, "Listen to the clouds when they stack up like that to the west. Rain's coming by nightfall." He never raised his voice, never showed impatience when she had to ask twice or made mistakes. 3 weeks into her new life, Clara met the rest of Bellstone's better citizens. Dr. Benjamin Harvey arrived first, spectacles fogged with sweat, to check on a cut Thatcher had gotten from barbed wire. He was a thin man who moved like a nervous bird, but his hands were steady and gentle. "And who's this?" he asked, noticing Clara hovering in the doorway. "Clara Reed," Thatcher said firmly, as if daring anyone to question it. "She lives here now." The doctor's eyes flickered with understanding. "Miss Reed, pleasure to meet you. You're looking healthier than when I saw you in town." Clara realized he'd been in the crowd that day but hadn't bid. The shame of that memory made her look away, but he continued cheerfully. "I hear you've been helping with the ranch work. Good for the Constitution. Outdoor labor. Better than any medicine I could prescribe." Samuel Colt, no relation to the gunmaker, he'd always clarify, came by next. The blacksmith's hands were permanently stained with soot, and his laugh boomed like thunder. He brought a set of smaller tools that might fit younger hands better, and spent an afternoon showing Clara how to shape hot metal. "Fire's like a living thing," he explained, pumping the bellows. "You gotta respect it, but not fear it. Fear makes you hesitate, and hesitation with hot iron means mistakes." Sheriff William Danvers was different from the lawman Clara had known. He didn't swagger or threaten, a quiet man with eyes that had seen too much. He stopped by one evening to check on things. Clara tensed when she saw the badge, but he simply tipped his hat to her and accepted Thatcher's offer of coffee. "Heard Harlan's been making noise in town," Danvers said conversationally, "saying he was cheated out of property." "The girl is not property," Thatcher replied evenly. "Never said she was, just keeping you informed. Man like Harlan holds grudges like some folks hold on to gold." After he left, Clara asked, "Will he make trouble for you, the sheriff?" "Danvers, no. He's one of the good ones. Fought in the war. Came out here to forget. He upholds the law, but he also knows sometimes the law and what's right don't match up perfect. The landscape around the ranch became Clara's classroom. She learned that jackrabbits zigzagged when they ran, that rattlesnakes gave warning if you listened, that tumbleweeds weren't native but came from Russia. Seeds stuck to immigrants' clothes, foreigners like her, making a home in hostile soil. Evenings on the porch became her favorite time. The desert transformed at sunset. Red rocks burning orange, then purple, then black. Coyotes sang their wild songs while stars emerged like scattered salt. Sometimes Thatcher would share stories of the ranch's early days, when he and Mary had first claimed the land. "Wasn't much water then," he recalled. "Had to dig 3 wells before we found a good source. Mary said I was stubborn as the rocks themselves. Guess she was right." Ruth visited twice a week, always with fresh bread and local gossip. She and Thatcher had an easy friendship built on years of shared history. Clara noticed how Ruth's sharp edges softened around him, how his rare smiles came easier in her presence. "You ever think about marrying again?" Clara asked one evening after Ruth had left. The question surprised them both. Thatcher was quiet for a long moment. "Mary's a hard act to follow," he said finally. "Besides, what woman would want a broken-down rancher with more debts than cattle?" "Miss Ruth might." He actually colored slightly. "Ruth Harrison has better sense than that." But Clara saw how he watched Ruth's wagon until it disappeared into the distance, how he cleaned up extra careful on the days she visited. The first time Clara tried target practice, she couldn't hit the broad side of the barn. The revolver felt alien in her hands, heavy with possibility. Thatcher stood behind her, patient as stone. "You're thinking too hard," he observed. "Don't close your eyes. Don't jerk the trigger. Squeeze it gentle, like you're trying not to wake a baby." "Never held a baby," Clara muttered. "Like you're trying not to spook a rabbit, then breathe in, breathe half out, then squeeze." The bottle exploded on her 15th try. The satisfaction surprised her, not joy in destruction, but pride in skill earned. "Why teach me this?" she asked, lowering the gun. "Because the world's not always kind to those who can't defend themselves. Rather you know and never need it than need it and not know." Some nights were harder than others. Clara would wake to Jonah whining at her door, drawn by her nightmares. Once, she found Thatcher sitting on the porch at 3 a.m, staring at nothing. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, joining him. "Some nights the past gets loud," he admitted. "You." "Same." They sat in comfortable silence until dawn. 2 souls carrying weights they couldn't name, but shared burdens somehow seemed lighter. Clara discovered an old journal in the barn, water-damaged but still usable. She began writing in it not daily, but when feelings pressed against her ribs like caged birds. She wrote about the smell of rain on dusty ground, how it made the whole world exhale. She wrote about Jonah stealing cornbread and the mock trial they held, with Ruth as judge and Thatcher as the defense attorney. She wrote about fear, to the ice in her veins when hoofbeats approached, the way her body remembered dangers her mind tried to forget. One evening, a storm rolled in fast and violent. Lightning split the sky while thunder shook the windows. The chickens squawked in panic, and Clara found herself pressed against the kitchen wall, making herself small. "Just weather," Thatcher said calmly, lighting extra lamps. "House has weathered worse." But he saw her fear and didn't dismiss it. Instead, he began talking about how to read storms, how to tell the dangerous ones from the loud ones. Knowledge became armor against terror. "See how the lightning's moving east, storms passing, not settling. We'll have clear skies by morning." He was right. Dawn came bright and clean, puddles reflecting sky like scattered mirrors. Clara helped check for damage, learning how to spot loose boards and stressed fence posts. Everything could be fixed with work and time, a lesson that applied to more than property. The community of Bellstone began to accept Clara's presence. At first, she was that girl Thatcher took in, but gradually she became Clara Reed, the rancher's daughter. The transformation happened in small ways. Samuel Colt nodding to her on the street. Doctor Harvey asking her opinion on the weather. Ruth teaching her to make biscuits that were fluffy as clouds, not hard as rocks like Thatcher's. But not everyone approved. Clara felt the cold stares of certain townspeople, heard the whispers about charity cases and bad blood. Thatcher noticed too. People fear what they don't understand, he told her after a particularly cold reception at the general store. Their opinions don't change who you are. Who am I? Clara asked, the question bursting out before she could stop it. You're Clara Reed. Your brave faced down worse than most adults and came through standing. You're smart, learning to read and figure better every day. You're kind seeing you sharing your lunch with Jonah even when you're hungry. Most important, you're choosing who to be every day. That's more than most folks can say. The words settled into Clara's bones like truth. She was choosing to trust, to work, to hope. Each day she chose to be Clara Reed instead of the frightened girl on the auction block. As summer deepened, the ranch showed signs of their combined labor. Fences stood straighter. The chicken coop no longer leaked, and the vegetable garden Clara had started was beginning to sprout. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. One particularly hot afternoon, Clara was reading aloud from an old almanac, practicing her letters while Thatcher mended harnesses when Jonah suddenly growled. The hair on his neck stood up as he faced the road. Inside, Thatcher said quietly, not looking up from his work, but his hands stilling. Take the rifle from behind the door. You remember what I taught you? Clara nodded, moving carefully toward the house. Her heart hammered, but her hands were steady. This was different from her old fear. She wasn't helpless now. She had skills. She had Thatcher. She had a home to defend. The riders were still distant, dust clouds announcing their approach. Maybe innocent travelers, maybe not. In the West, you prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. Probably nothing, Thatcher called softly. But best to be ready. Clara took her position by the window. Rifle ready but not visible. Whatever came down that road, she wouldn't face it as a victim. The girl who had whispered, thrown out, just like Papa did, was learning to stand her ground. The riders passed by surveyors from the railroad, maps and instruments visible in their packs. The danger dissolved like morning mist. But the lesson remained. Vigilance was the price of safety, and safety was worth any price. That night, as Clara wrote in her journal about the day's small drama, she realized something had shifted. She no longer thought constantly of escape, of somewhere else to run. This place, these people, this life they were becoming hers. Not because someone said so, but because she chose it. The desert wind sang through the eaves, and somewhere in the darkness, coyotes called to each other across the vast spaces. But inside the small house, lamplight pushed back the shadows, and two people who had been alone were learning the careful dance of family. The storm signs had been gathering for days, not in the sky, but in the movements of men. Clara noticed it first at the Saturday market conversations that stopped when she passed. Eyes that followed their wagon with calculation rather than curiosity. Harlan's associates. The Pierce brothers Jesse and Frank lounged against the saloon wall like vultures waiting for something to die. Trouble's brewing, Ruth murmured when they stopped by her bakery. She wrapped extra loaves without being asked. Harlan's been talking, says he's got legal claim to the girl. Thatcher's jaw tightened. Legal? Man wouldn't know legal from a hole in the ground. Doesn't matter what's true if enough people believe the lie, Ruth replied, her voice low. And he's been buying drinks, spreading coin around, building support. On the ride home, Clara felt the weight of being a burden. I could leave, she said quietly. Go somewhere he can't find me. Thatcher's hands tightened on the reins. You're not running. This is your home. We defend what's ours. But I'm not really yours, Clara whispered. Not by law. Law. He spat the word. Same law that let him put you on that platform. Same law that says a man can own another person if the paperwork's right. There's law, and there's what's right. They're not always the same thing. That night, Thatcher began preparations. He cleaned and oiled both rifles, checked ammunition, reinforced the shutters. Clara helped, trying to still the trembling in her hands. "You scared?" she asked. "A man who says he's never scared is either a liar or a fool," Thatcher replied. "Fear keeps you sharp. It's what you do with the fear that matters." They established watches Thatcher would take first shift. Clara, the early morning hours. She'd proven herself a light sleeper, years of vigilance serving a new purpose. Jonah was stationed on the porch, his low growls better than any alarm. 3 days passed in tense quiet. Then, just as they began to relax, the Pierce brothers appeared at the gate. They didn't cross the property line, not yet, but sat their horses just outside. Black hats pulled low, making their presence known. "Theodore Reed," Jessie called out, voice carrying in the still air. "Mr. Coyle wants to discuss business, peaceful-like." "Nothing to discuss," Thatcher replied from the porch, rifle visible but not raised. "The girl stays here." "Now, that's not neighborly." Frank chimed in. "Mr. Coyle has papers, legal documentation of purchase, all signed and witnessed. Forged papers aren't worth the match to burn them." "That's a serious accusation." Jessie's voice hardened. Man could find himself in trouble, making accusations he can't prove. Clara watched from the window, fighting the urge to show herself. She knew Harlan's game make her afraid enough to run, isolated enough to be vulnerable, but something had changed in her these past months. The fear was there, but so was anger. How dare they hunt her like an animal? The Pierce brothers left after an hour of fruitless threats. But their message was clear: this wasn't over. That night, Ruth arrived unexpectedly with Sheriff Danvers. They gathered around the kitchen table like a war council. Harlan's filed a formal complaint. Danvers explained. "Says you stole his property. He's got documents." "Fake documents," Thatcher insisted. "Maybe so, but they look real enough. Got witnesses saying they saw him purchase the girl in Denver. Bills of sale going back 2 years. Clara felt ice in her veins. "That's not true. I was never in Denver with him." "I believe you," Danvers said gently. "But belief and proof are different animals. Harlan's building a case. He's got money spreading around, favors being called in. Some folks are starting to listen." "So what do we do?" Ruth asked, her hand finding Clara's under the table. "We need our own proof," Danvers replied. "Character witnesses. Documentation that Clara was somewhere else during the time Harlan claims to have bought her. Anything that contradicts his story." The problem was, Clara's past was a maze of informal arrangements and off-the-books transactions. No paperwork followed orphans and runaways. Her existence had been deliberately erased by those who profited from her invisibility. "There was a woman in Cheyenne," Clara offered hesitantly. "Mrs. Washington. She ran a boarding house where I stayed for a while. She might remember me." "That's a start." Danvers nodded. "I'll send a telegram tomorrow." After they left, Thatcher and Clara sat by the dying fire. "I'm sorry," she said, "for bringing this trouble to you." "You didn't bring anything," he replied firmly. "Harlan brought it. Men like him always do. They can't stand seeing something good happen if they're not profiting from it." The next morning brought escalation. Clara went to feed the chickens and found them scattered, several missing. The coop door hung open, though she knew she'd latched it the night before. A message. Subtle but clear: "We can reach you whenever we want." Thatcher's face darkened when he saw it. "They were on my land." "Proving it's another matter," Clara said, echoing Danvers' words. She was learning the bitter lesson of frontier justice. Being right meant nothing without the power to enforce it. They spent the day repairing and reinforcing. Samuel Colt arrived with iron hinges that won't give way to tampering, and Doctor. Harvey brought medical supplies just in case. The community was choosing sides, and not everyone was choosing theirs. That evening, a rock crashed through the kitchen window. Wrapped around it was a note, last chance. Send the girl out or face consequences. Well, Thatcher said, sweeping up glass. Least they're being direct now. Clara helped board up the window. Each hammer strike an act of defiance. When I first came here, she said, I promised myself I'd never be helpless again. I meant it. I know you did. If they come, I won't hide. I won't run. Thatcher paused in his work. Clara, you're 12 years old. No one expects... I'm not 12 anymore, she interrupted. Haven't been for a long time. Age is just numbers. I stopped being a child the night they took my mother. He looked at her then, really looked, and saw the truth of it. The girl he'd taken from the platform was gone, replaced by someone harder and more determined. The West did that aged you in ways that had nothing to do with birthdays. All right, he said quietly. But we do this smart. No heroics. We protect each other. That night, Clara wrote in her journal, They want me to be afraid. I am, but I'm other things too angry. Determined, grateful. I have something worth fighting for now. That changes everything. The wind picked up near midnight, rattling the boards they'd nailed over the window. Clara lay awake, listening. The rifle within reach, somewhere in the darkness. She knew Harlan's men were planning their next move, but so was she. The journal entry continued. Thatcher says home isn't just a place. It's a choice you make every day. I choose this. I choose to stand with the man who saw me as a person when everyone else saw property. I choose to fight for the life we're building. They may come with papers and guns and legal lies, but I have something stronger. I have family, not by blood, but by choice. And that's the kind that really matters. The windmill creaked its familiar rhythm, a sound that had become as comforting as a lullaby. Whatever tomorrow brought, Clara Reed would face it standing up. The scared girl on the auction platform was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that freedom wasn't given. It was taken, claimed, defended. She touched the red ribbon tied around her wrist. Her mother's gift transformed into her own symbol. Tomorrow she might have to fire the rifle propped against her bed. Tomorrow she might have to become someone harder still. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, home, with family, ready to protect what they'd built together. The coyotes sang their wild songs in the distance, and Clara finally slept. One hand on the rifle stock, the other clutching the ribbon. The storm was coming, but she would not face it alone. They came at dusk, when the light was tricky and shadows played games with perception. Clara spotted the dust cloud, first too large for normal travelers, moving too deliberately to be casual. Her whistle brought Thatcher from the barn, and they took their positions without words. Weeks of preparation had made them a team. 6 riders. Thatcher counted, squinting through the rifle scope. Harlan in front, the Pierce brothers flanking. Don't recognize the others. Clara checked her ammunition, hands steady despite her racing heart. The weight of the rifle felt different now, not just wood and metal, but responsibility. She positioned mirrors they'd placed to watch blind spots, angling them to catch the dying light. Remember, Thatcher said quietly, we don't fire first, but if they cross that fence line with harmful intent, we defend ourselves. The riders stopped just outside the property boundary. Harlan Coyle sat his horse like a king surveying peasants, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. Reed, let's discuss this like civilized men. No need for unpleasantness. State your business from there, Thatcher called back. You have something that belongs to me. I've come to collect. The girl belongs to no one but herself. Harlan laughed, an ugly sound. The law says different. I have papers. Your papers are lies. Prove it. Harlan's voice hardened. You can't, can you? Because the girl's a ghost. No records, no history. Nobody who matters will miss her when she's gone. The words hit Clara like physical blows, but she held her position. He was wrong. People would miss her now. She mattered now. Last chance. Read. Send her out, and we leave peaceful. Make us come get her, and things get complicated. If you cross that fence line, you'll be trespassing. Sheriff Danvers knows you're here. He's watching. Danvers is one man, 20 miles away. Lot can happen in 20 miles. The standoff stretched, tense as a drawn bowstring. Then Jesse Pierce made the first move, spurring his horse forward. The fence was just wood and wire, symbolic more than practical, but symbols mattered. That's far enough, Thatcher warned, rifle rising. Jesse grinned. Or what? You'll shoot a man for riding onto your dried-up piece of nothing. A shot rang out not from Thatcher, but from Clara. The bullet kicked up dust inches from Jesse's horse, making it dance sideways. Her message was clear, the next one would be closer. The girl's got teeth, Frank Pierce observed with amusement. Pull back, Harlan ordered sharply. He hadn't expected resistance with conviction behind it. We'll do this proper. They retreated beyond the fence, but didn't leave. As full dark fell, Clara could see the glow of their campfire. They were settling in for a siege. They'll try something tonight, Thatcher predicted. Men like that don't have patience for waiting. He was right. Near midnight, Jonah's growling alerted them. Clara watched from her window position as shadows moved along the fence line. They were trying to flank the house, come at it from multiple angles. The barn, Clara whispered, spotting movement near the structure. If they set fire to it, the light would blind the defenders while giving the attackers cover. Thatcher moved silently to the back door. Cover the front. I'll handle the barn. Clara wanted to protest. Splitting up seemed dangerous, but she understood the necessity. She couldn't be everywhere, couldn't protect everyone. All she could do was hold her position and trust. The first torch sailed through the air toward the barn roof. Thatcher's rifle cracked, and the torchbearer spun and fell. Another man rushed forward, but Clara fired, her shot shattering the lantern he carried, splashing burning oil across the ground rather than onto the building. Pull back, someone shouted. The attackers retreated, dragging their wounded companion. But they weren't done. Next came attempts to spook the horses, rocks thrown at windows, shots fired high to intimidate. Clara and Thatcher answered each probe with measured responses, enough to discourage, not enough to waste ammunition. How long can we keep this up? Clara asked during a lull, passing Thatcher water. Long as we need to, he replied, but she heard the weariness in his voice. They were 2 against 6, defending a perimeter too large for their numbers. Dawn brought a temporary reprieve. The attackers pulled back to their camp, probably to rest and replan. Clara used the time to tend to minor cuts from flying glass, while Thatcher checked their ammunition reserves. We're holding, he said, trying to sound encouraging. For now, Clara added. They both knew the math. Time favored the attackers. The second night was worse. This time they came with more torches, more coordination. Clara found herself running from window to window, trying to cover too many approaches. A thrown torch caught the chicken coop despite her efforts, and she had to watch it burn, unable to leave her position to fight the fire. Let it go, Thatcher called when she started to move. They're trying to draw us out. The smoke stung her eyes, and the sound of panicked chickens tore at her heart, but she held position. War meant choosing what you could save and what you had to sacrifice. Then Thatcher made a sound, half gasp, half grunt. Clara turned to see him pressed against the wall, hand clutched to his side. Just grazed me, he said, but blood seeped between his fingers. Clara's world narrowed to that spreading stain. We need to stop the bleeding. Not yet, they're still out there. But the attack was already faltering. Maybe they'd achieved their goal. Or maybe Dawn was too close. But the shadows pulled back. Clara heard horses riding away, though she knew some probably remained to watch. She helped Thatcher to the kitchen, hands shaking as she cleaned and bandaged the wound. It was deeper than he'd admitted, though thankfully not life-threatening. "You need a doctor," she said. "Can't leave you here alone. You'll die if that gets infected." "I'm not leaving." Clara made a decision that would have terrified her months ago. "Then I'll go get help." "Clara." "No." Her voice was firm as iron. "You saved me. Now I save you. That's what family does." She prepared quickly, saddling Ash, packing medical supplies, loading a pistol. Thatcher tried to protest, but the fever was already starting, weakening his arguments. "If they come while I'm gone," Clara started. "I'll handle it. You just ride fast and careful." She kissed his forehead, a gesture that surprised them both, then swung into the saddle. The pre-dawn darkness was her ally now, helping her slip past any watchers. The ride to town became a blur of pounding hooves and prayer. Clara pushed Ash harder than ever before, trusting the horse to find safe footing in the treacherous light. The red ribbon on her wrist whipped in the wind, a bright spot of color in the gray world. She burst into Bellstone as the sun crested the horizon, not caring who saw her desperation. Doctor. Harvey's house was at the end of the main street, and she nearly fell from the saddle in her haste to reach his door. "Please," she gasped when he answered, still in his nightshirt. "Thatcher's hurt, shot, needs help." To his credit, Harvey didn't ask questions. He grabbed his bag and was saddling his own horse within minutes. "How bad?" "Bleeding stopped, but fever's starting." "Good girl for coming. Let's ride." As they prepared to leave town, Harlan Coyle stepped out of the saloon despite the early hour. His clothes were dusty, and there was a bandage visible on one of his companion's arms, proof of the night's violence. "Well, well," he drawled. "Little bird flew the nest. Means the old man's alone now." Clara turned Ash to face him directly. "You want to hurt him? You go through me first." Brave words for a little ghost. "I'm not a ghost." Clara's voice carried across the street. "I'm Clara Reed. I live on the Reed Ranch. I have friends who'll witness that. And if you or your men set foot on our property again, I'll defend my home and my father." The word father rang in the morning air. She hadn't planned to say it, but it felt right. True. Harlan's face darkened. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Sheriff Danvers emerged from the hotel, badge glinting. "Got a telegram from Cheyenne yesterday. Mrs. Washington remembers Clara quite well. Says she was in her employment during the exact time you claim to have purchased her in Denver. Funny how a girl can be in two places at once." The Pierce brothers flanked Harlan, hands hovering near their weapons, but Danvers wasn't alone either. Samuel Colt stood outside his smithy, hammer in hand. Ruth appeared on her bakery steps. Other townspeople emerged, drawn by the confrontation. Seems the community's made its position clear. Danvers continued, "You're done here. Coyle, move on." For a moment, violence crackled in the air like lightning before a storm. Then Harlan smiled, cold and mean. "Legal matters aside, accidents happen on the frontier. Rattlesnakes, bad water, prairie fires. Dangerous place for a girl alone." "She's not alone," Ruth said firmly. "Never will be," Samuel added. One by one. The decent folks of Bellstone stood witness. Not everyone, some still looked away, but enough. Enough to show that Clara Reed existed, was seen, was valued. Harlan spat in the dust. "This isn't finished." "It is for now," Danvers replied. "And you'll be moving on today, or we'll have a different kind of conversation." Clara didn't wait to see the outcome. She and Doctor. Harvey rode hard for the ranch, her heart pounding with new fear. What if Harlan had circled back? What if Thatcher? But they found him where she'd left him, conscious but weak. Harvey worked with quiet efficiency, cleaning the wound properly, stitching what needed stitching, leaving medicines and instructions. "He'll be fine. the doctor assured her. Thanks to you, few more hours and infection might have set in too deep. After Harvey left, Clara sat beside Thatcher's bed, exhaustion finally catching up. He reached out, taking her hand. You called me father, he said softly. In town. Did I say it wrong? No, you said it just right. Clara felt tears threaten for the first time in years. I was so scared I'd lose you. Can't get rid of me that easy. We've got a ranch to run. Remember? Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning away the shadows of night. The chicken coop was gone. Black timbers still smoking. Fence posts bore bullet scars. But the house stood strong, and the people inside it were stronger. It's not over, Clara said. Harlan won't give up. Maybe not, Thatcher agreed. But he learned something important last night. We're not easy prey. And you're not alone anymore. That changes the game. Clara squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses that matched her own now. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Harlan would likely try again, legal or otherwise, but tonight they were alive, together, and home. The war wasn't over, but they'd won this battle, and sometimes, on the frontier, that was enough to build hope on. The fever came in waves, each one pulling Thatcher deeper into delirium. Clara kept vigil through the long night, replacing cool cloths on his forehead, spooning water between his cracked lips. He mumbled in his sleep Mary's name, apologies to ghosts, and once, clearly, don't let them take my daughter. I won't, Clara whispered, though he couldn't hear. I promise. Doctor, Harvey had done what he could, but infection was winning. The wound itself wasn't fatal, but the fever might be. Clara knew with bone-deep certainty that Thatcher needed more help than she could give, and the nearest hospital was in Larch Hollow, a day's ride through dangerous territory, as dawn broke pale and unforgiving. Clara made her choice. She saddled Ash again, packed what medicine remained, and prepared for a journey that might save Thatcher or lose them both. You stay strong, she told him, not knowing if he heard. I'll be back. The trail to Larch Hollow wound through canyon country, red rocks rising like walls on either side. Clara pushed Ash as hard as she dared, knowing that speed meant everything but that a lame horse meant death. The sun climbed mercilessly, turning the world into a furnace. At Mustang Creek, she stopped to water Ash and refill her canteen. That's when she heard them hoofbeats echoing off the canyon walls. Her heart sank. She'd hoped Harlan's men would stay focused on the ranch, not expect her to run for help. 3 riders appeared around the bend. Not the Pierce brothers, but men she recognized from the saloon hired guns with empty eyes and ready weapons. They spread out, blocking the trail. Well now, the leader drawled, little bird flying far from her nest. Clara's hand moved to the pistol at her hip. I'm going to Larch Hollow. Got no quarrel with you. See? That's where you're wrong. Mr. Coyle. He's got a powerful quarrel with you. Figures if we bring you back, your old man will be more reasonable. He's dying, Clara said bluntly. I need to get help. Not our problem. They moved to surround her, confident in their numbers. Clara waited, reading their positions, remembering Thatcher's lessons about staying calm when outnumbered. Then she did the unexpected, spurring Ash not away from them, but directly at the leader. The horse responded magnificently, bowling the man aside. His companions fired, but shooting at a moving target from horseback was harder than stories made it seem. Clara bent low over Ash's neck, urging him into the narrow side canyon she'd spotted earlier. It was a desperate gamble. The canyon might lead nowhere, trapping her. But staying on the main trail meant certain capture. Behind her. She heard cursing and the clatter of hooves on stone as they pursued. The canyon twisted and turned, growing narrower. Clara's heart soared when she saw the light ahead. It opened onto another trail. But her relief died as she realized one rider had circled around, now blocking her exit. No choice but forward. She drew her pistol, firing not at the man but at the rock wall beside him. The ricochet and shower of stone chips made his horse rear, creating just enough space. Clara and Ash burst through, the rider's fingers barely missing her jacket. But the chase had cost time, and Ash was laboring. Foam flecked his mouth, and his breathing came in great gasps. Clara knew she was killing him, and the knowledge tore at her heart. But Thatcher was dying too, and she had to choose. "Just a little more," she begged the horse. "Please." By some miracle, they reached the outskirts of Larch Hollow as the sun touched the western peaks. Clara didn't stop at the hotel or sheriff's office. She rode straight to the hospital, nearly falling from the saddle in the courtyard. "Please," she gasped to the startled nurses. "My father Theodore Reed shot infected. Doctor, Harvey sent me." They took her seriously. Bless them. Within minutes, a team was preparing to ride back with her. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, the hospital's head physician, took charge with crisp efficiency. "How long has he been feverish?" "Since yesterday, maybe longer." "We'll need to move fast. Nurse Anderson, prepare the emergency kit. We'll take the medical wagon." As they prepared, Clara tended to Ash. The horse was spent, sides heaving, head hanging low. She stroked his neck, tears falling freely. "You saved him," she whispered. "You saved us both." A stable hand approached. "I'll take good care of him. Miss, he's a hero, that one." The ride back was a blur of urgency and prayer. Doctor Blackwell drove the wagon like a woman possessed, while Clara rode alongside on a fresh horse, watching for trouble. But the roads were empty. Perhaps Harlan's men were still searching the canyons, or perhaps word of her reaching Larch Hollow had called them off. They arrived to find Ruth sitting with Thatcher, her face drawn with worry. "He's been asking for you," she said, "in between the fever dreams." Dr. Blackwell took over with a competence that gave Clara hope. She examined the wound, checked his vital signs, and began administering medicines Clara didn't recognize. "The infection is advanced, but not hopeless," she announced. "I'll need to operate to clean the wound properly. Miss Reed, you should wait outside." "No," Clara's voice was firm. "I stay." The doctor studied her, then nodded. "Very well. You can help by keeping him calm if he wakes." What followed was the longest hour of Clara's life. She held Thatcher's hand as doctor. Blackwell worked, whispering stories about the ranch, about Jonah stealing biscuits, about anything that might reach him through the fever's haze. Once, his eyes opened, focusing on her face. "Clara, I'm here. You're going to be fine." "Proud of you," he murmured before slipping back into unconsciousness. When Dr. Blackwell finally stepped back, her face was cautiously optimistic. "I've done what I can. The next 24 hours will tell. If the fever breaks, he should recover fully." Clara didn't leave his side. Ruth brought food she couldn't eat. Samuel stopped by with news that Harlan had been seen heading south, and Sheriff Danvers reported that telegrams to surrounding towns had put everyone on alert for the trafficker. Through it all, Clara kept watch. She talked to Thatcher about everything and nothing, her dreams of learning to read properly, plans for expanding the garden, how she wanted to build a new chicken coop, stronger than before. She hummed the lullabies her mother had sung, the ones she'd thought forgotten until they rose unbidden from memory. Near dawn, she felt his hand squeeze hers. His forehead was cool, the fever finally broken. When his eyes opened, they were clear. "Hey there," he said weakly. "Hey yourself," Clara's voice cracked with relief. "Did I miss anything exciting?" She laughed through her tears. "Just me stealing a horse, outrunning bandits, and bringing back a doctor. Normal day." "That's my girl." Dr. Blackwell confirmed what Clara's heart already knew: the crisis had passed. With rest and care, Thatcher would recover completely. As the woman prepared to leave, she pulled Clara aside. "You saved his life," she said simply. Your quick action, your courage, many grown men wouldn't have done what you did. He saved mine first. Clara replied, Then you're even. The doctor smiled. Though something tells me you'll keep saving each other. That's what family does. As the morning sun filled the room, Clara finally allowed exhaustion to claim her. She curled up in the chair beside Thatcher's bed, still holding his hand. Ruth covered her with a blanket, and Thatcher watched his daughter sleep. Seeing in her face both the frightened child he'd taken from the auction block and the fierce young woman she was becoming, "Thank you," he whispered to whatever powers had brought them together. Later, when the sheriff came to take Clara's statement about the attack on the trail, she gave it clearly and calmly. 3 men had tried to kidnap her. She'd defended herself and escaped. Their descriptions were detailed and accurate. "We'll add attempted kidnapping to Harlan's charges," Danvers said. "This has gone beyond shady business dealings. He's a wanted man now." But Clara barely heard him. Her world had narrowed to this room, this recovery, this fragile and precious thing called home. She'd ridden through fire to save it, and she'd do it again without hesitation. As Thatcher grew stronger over the following days, they talked about the future. The ranch needed rebuilding, not just the physical damage, but the sense of safety. They would do it together, along with the community that had finally stood up to be counted. "We should make it official," Thatcher said one evening. "The adoption, legal papers that no one can challenge." Clara nodded, throat tight. Clara Reed, legal and proper. My daughter, legal and proper. Ruth, who had been pretending not to eavesdrop while arranging flowers, sniffled audibly. "About time. And while we're making things official," she looked meaningfully at Thatcher. He actually blushed. "One thing at a time, Ruth." But Clara caught the soft look that passed between them and smiled. Her family was growing in ways she'd never imagined possible. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Harlan was still out there, and men like him didn't give up easily. The ranch needed work, money was tight, and the memories of violence would take time to fade. But sitting in that sun-filled room, surrounded by people who'd chosen to be her family, Clara felt something she'd thought lost forever safe. Not the fragile safety of hiding, but the solid safety of belonging. She was Clara Reed, daughter of Theodore Reed, citizen of Bellstone, defender of her home. The girl who'd whispered thrown out, just like Papa did, had found her place to stand. And she would never be moved from it again. The courthouse in Larch Hollow stood like a temple to justice, its white columns gleaming in the morning sun. Clara adjusted her new dress. Ruth had insisted on making it for the occasion and tried to calm her racing heart. Today, she would stand before a judge and tell her truth. "Are you ready?" Thatcher asked, still moving carefully from his wound, but standing tall in his best suit. "Ready," Clara said, though her voice shook slightly. Sheriff Danvers met them at the entrance, his expression serious. "Harlan's here. Brought a lawyer from Denver. Smooth talker named William Jennings. They're going to fight this hard." Inside, the courtroom buzzed with conversation. Word had spread about the case, the trafficker versus the rancher, with a child's freedom hanging in the balance. Clara recognized faces from Bellstone mixed with strangers who'd come to witness the drama. Judge Thomas Edison presided, a stern man with piercing eyes that seemed to see through pretense. He called the court to order with sharp raps of his gavel. "We're here to determine the legal status of the minor known as Clara," he began. "Mr. Coyle claims ownership through purchase. Mr. Reed claims illegal trafficking. Let's hear the evidence." Harlan's lawyer went first. Smooth as oil, he presented papers, witnesses who swore they'd seen Clara in Harlan's employment for years, documents that looked official enough to fool the casual observer. "My client is a businessman." Jennings intoned. "He provided food and shelter for a wayward child, asking only honest work in return. Now she's been stolen from him by force." Clara felt rage build in her chest. Every word was a lie wrapped in legal language, making evil sound reasonable. Then it was their turn. Sheriff Danvers presented the telegram from Mrs. Washington in Cheyenne, directly contradicting Harlan's timeline. Dr. Harvey testified about Clara's condition when she first arrived at the ranch, malnourished, frightened, bearing signs of harsh treatment. Would you describe her state as that of a well-cared-for employee? Their lawyer, a young man named Abraham Lincoln, asked. I'd describe it as survival. Doctor, Harvey replied firmly. Nothing more. Ruth took the stand next, her usual sharp humor replaced by quiet dignity. She told of watching Clara bloom under actual care, of a child learning to trust again. The difference, Ruth said, looking directly at Harlan, between ownership and family is love. One seeks to use, the other seeks to nurture. Anyone with eyes can see which one Clara found at the Reed Ranch. Finally, it was Clara's turn. Her legs felt weak as she approached the witness chair, but Thatcher's encouraging nod gave her strength. State your name for the record. Judge Edison instructed. Clara Reed, she said clearly. Objection. Jennings called out. The witness's legal name is in dispute. Overruled. The witness may identify herself as she chooses. Continue, Miss Reed. Abraham Lincoln approached her gently. Clara, can you tell us about your life before coming to Mr. Reed's ranch? Clara took a deep breath and began. She told of her mother's disappearance, the series of places that bought and sold her labor, the fear that became her constant companion. She spoke of the auction platform, the rope around her wrists, the men bidding on her like livestock. And what happened when Mr. Reed intervened? He didn't bid, Clara said, meeting the judge's eyes. He said I wasn't property. He paid to end it, not to own me. Then he gave me a choice, come with him or go my own way. First choice I'd had in 5 years. And life at the ranch. Here Clara's voice grew stronger. She told of learning to read and write, of honest work fairly shared, of being called by name instead of girl or hey you. She spoke of defending the ranch, not from obligation but from love, of riding through the night to save the man who'd saved her. He's my father, she concluded simply, not by blood, but by choice, his and mine both. Jennings rose for cross-examination, his smile sharp as a blade. Miss Reed, you claim Mr. Coyle mistreated you. Can you provide specific instances? Clara's chin lifted. Beyond selling me on an auction block? Answer the question. She did, calmly recounting years of deprivation and fear. But Jennings twisted each word, suggesting she was ungrateful, that hard work was character building, that discipline was necessary for wayward children. Isn't it true, he pressed, that you ran away multiple times, that you were difficult, disobedient? I tried to find my mother, Clara shot back. Wouldn't you? I'm asking the questions here. Judge Edison intervened. The witness may explain her actions. Counselor. Clara gathered her courage. Yes, I disobeyed, because what they called employment was imprisonment. What they called care was control. I wasn't difficult, I was trying to stay human. The courtroom fell silent. Even Jennings seemed momentarily at loss for words. When testimony concluded, Judge Edison retired to consider. The waiting felt eternal. Clara sat between Thatcher and Ruth, drawing strength from their presence. Across the aisle, Harlan whispered furiously with his lawyer, his face darkening with each passing minute. Finally, the judge returned. This case, he began, represents a larger issue plaguing our frontier, the trafficking of children under the guise of employment contracts, the exploitation of the vulnerable by those with power and papers. He looked at Harlan. Mr. Coyle, your documents may have the appearance of legality, but this court finds them fraudulent in nature and intent. The witness testimony clearly establishes a pattern of trafficking and abuse. Then to Clara. Miss Reed. Your courage in speaking today helps not just yourself, but others who suffer in silence. This court recognizes Theodore Reed as your legal guardian and confirms your status as his daughter. The gavel came down with finality. Clara felt her knees buckle with relief, caught by Thatcher's steady arm around them. The courtroom erupted, some in celebration, others in outrage. "This isn't over," Harlan snarled, pushing past his lawyer. "You think some paper changes anything? Accidents happen. Reed, to you and your brat both." Sheriff Danvers stepped forward. "Mr. Coyle, you just threatened witnesses in open court. That's added to your charges." He nodded to his deputies. "Take him." The arrest happened fast. Harlan fought, but the deputies were ready. As they dragged him out, his eyes found Clara one last time, promising vengeance without words. "He'll be in prison for a long while," Danvers assured them. "Trafficking, attempted kidnapping, threats he's looking at hard time." Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. Some were curiosity seekers, but others were there to celebrate. Samuel Colt whooped and tossed his hat in the air. "Doctor," Harvey shook Thatcher's hand repeatedly. Even Mrs. Washington had made the journey from Cheyenne, crushing Clara in a tearful embrace. "I'm so proud of you, child," she whispered. "Your mama would be too." That evening, back at the ranch, they held a quiet celebration. The legal papers sat on the mantel, official adoption documents, making Clara Reed a reality in law as well as heart. "It's really over," Clara marveled, tracing her name on the document. "This part is," Thatcher agreed. "But Harlan has friends, men who think like him. We'll need to stay watchful." "We will," Ruth said firmly. She'd stayed for dinner and showed no signs of leaving. "All of us." As if to seal the promise, Samuel arrived with a gift, a new door bolt he'd forged specially. "Figure a family needs proper security," he said gruffly. Over the following weeks, the ranch transformed. The burned chicken coop was rebuilt stronger than before. Bullet holes were patched, fences mended. Neighbors who'd been distant before stopped by to help, as if the trial had given them permission to choose sides openly. Clara returned to her routines, but with a new confidence. The fear that had lived in her chest for so long was fading, replaced by something she hardly recognized: peace. She still woke sometimes, heart racing from nightmares, but now she could look at the adoption papers and remind herself she was Clara Reed. She belonged. One evening, as she was writing in her journal, Thatcher knocked on her door. "There's something I want to show you," he said. He led her to the barn, to a corner she'd never paid attention to. Moving aside some old boards, he revealed a small trunk. "This was Mary's," he explained. "Things I couldn't bear to look at after she passed, but I think she'd want you to have them." Inside were treasures books, fabric, a silver brush, and at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, a red ribbon. Clara's hands trembled as she lifted it. Not her mother's ribbon, but somehow perfect all the same. "Mary loved red," Thatcher said softly. "Said it meant strength and joy. Seemed fitting." Clara tied the ribbon around her wrist, where her mother's had once been. The circle complete, not the same, but continuing. Loss transformed into legacy. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you," he replied, "for giving me a reason to open that trunk, for giving this old place life again." They stood in comfortable silence, father and daughter, watching the sun set through the barn doors. The desert painted itself in shades of gold and crimson, beautiful in its harshness, generous to those who learned its ways. "What now?" Clara asked. "Now we live," Thatcher said simply. "We work the land, build the future, take care of each other. We make this place what it should be, a home where no child ever has to fear being thrown away again." Clara nodded, feeling the truth of it settle into her bones. The girl who'd stood on the auction block was gone, replaced by someone stronger, Clara Reed. Daughter, defender, survivor. She'd found her place in the world, carved it out with courage and held it with love, and she would never let it go. Spring came early that year, painting the desert in unexpected colors. Purple lupines carpeted the valleys while golden poppies climbed the hillsides. The ranch reflected this renewal. Fences stood straight and true. The new chicken coop housed a thriving flock, and the garden Clara had started was showing its first green shoots. 3 years had passed since the trial. Clara, now 15, had grown tall and strong, her hands capable and sure. She could rope a calf, mend a harness, and shoot straight enough to discourage any threat. But more than physical skills, she'd gained something precious: peace. The morning sun found her at the well, drawing water for the day's work. The windmill turned steadily in the breeze, its rhythm as familiar as her own heartbeat. Jonah lay nearby, older now but still faithful, his tail thumping whenever she glanced his way. "Morning, girl." Thatcher called from the porch. He moved easier these days, the old wound just a scar, an occasional twinge. Beside him stood Ruth, who'd finally accepted his proposal 6 months ago. Their wedding had been simple but joyful, the whole town turning out to celebrate. "Morning," Clara replied, carrying the water inside. "Samuel coming today?" "Should be. Wants to finish that new gate before the week's out." Samuel Colt had become more than the town blacksmith to Clara. At 18, he was young to run his own forge, but his skill was undeniable. More importantly, he treated Clara as an equal, their friendship built on shared work and easy conversation. The house had changed too. Ruth's touches were everywhere: curtains at the windows, flowers in jars, the smell of fresh bread constant. But she'd been careful to preserve what mattered, understanding that this home held memories she needed to honor, not erase. After breakfast, Clara walked to the small wooden markers she'd placed near the garden. L.R., carved simple and deep, a place to talk to her mother when the need arose. "We're doing good, Mama," she said softly. "Found my place, just like you always said I would. Still have your ribbon, well. 2 ribbons now. Still means freedom. But now I know freedom isn't just running away. It's having something worth staying for." "Clara," Ruth called. "Letter for you." Mail was still rare enough to be an event. Clara hurried back, accepting the envelope with curiosity. The return address made her heart skip. Office of Records, Denver, Colorado. With trembling fingers, she opened it and read, then read again, sinking slowly onto the porch steps. "What is it?" Thatcher asked, concern creeping into his voice. "They found her," Clara whispered. "They found records of my mother, Dolores Rivera, taken to work in a factory in Denver. Clara's voice broke. "She died there 2 years after they took her. Factory accident." The words hung in the air like dust motes, visible but untouchable. Ruth sat beside Clara, pulling her close, while Thatcher rested a steady hand on her shoulder. "She tried to get back to me," Clara continued, tears flowing freely now. "The records show she ran away 3 times. They always caught her, brought her back. The last time, she couldn't finish." They sat in shared grief, understanding that some wounds never fully healed, but after a while, Clara straightened, wiping her eyes. "At least I know," she said. "She didn't abandon me. She fought to come back." "Just like you fought to find her," Thatcher said quietly. "Same brave heart." That afternoon, Samuel arrived as promised. He found Clara in the barn, savagely attacking a pile of wood with an axe. "Heard about the letter?" he said simply. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. "Want company or want to be alone?" She paused, considering company, but working company, not talking company. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, Samuel shaping iron while Clara split wood. The rhythm of labor became meditation, each strike of hammer or axe beating out grief and transforming it into something else, not acceptance exactly, but endurance. As the sun began to sink, Samuel spoke. "My folks died when I was 10. Cholera. Always wondered if I could have done something different, saved them somehow." "Could you have—" "No, but knowing that and feeling it, two different things." He set down his hammer. "What I learned is, we honor the dead by living well. Your mama fought to get back to you. Maybe the best way to honor that is to be happy here, where you landed." Clara considered this. She'd like this place, she said finally. The openness, the honest work. She'd like Thatcher and Ruth. She'd be proud of who you've become. That evening, the ranch hosted an impromptu gathering. News traveled fast in small towns, and people came to offer quiet support. Dr. Harvey brought medical journals for Clara to read. She'd shown interest in healing arts. Sheriff Danvers mentioned that Harlan's gang had scattered after his imprisonment. No longer a threat, others simply came to be present, understanding that sometimes grief needed witness. As the crowd thinned, Clara found herself on the porch with Thatcher and Ruth, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I want to put up a proper marker," Clara said. "For Mama, not here someplace high, where she can see everything, where she'd be free." "I know just the place," Thatcher replied. "That bluff overlooking the valley. We'll go tomorrow." Ruth squeezed Clara's hand. "We could plant wildflowers there, make it beautiful." The next day, they did exactly that. The whole community turned out, transforming a simple memorial into an act of communal love. The marker read, "Dolores Rivera, mother, fighter, free at last." Standing there, overlooking the vast expanse of desert and mountain, Clara felt something shift inside her. The search that had driven her for so long was over. In its place came a different purpose to build the life her mother had wanted for her, to become the woman Dolores had believed she could be. Over the following months, Clara threw herself into new challenges. She helped Ruth establish a small school for local children, teaching letters and numbers to those even less fortunate than she'd been. She worked with Dr. Harvey, learning basic medicine that proved invaluable on a working ranch. She even started corresponding with Elizabeth Blackwell, the doctor who'd saved Thatcher, about possibilities for formal education. But it was the quiet moments that marked real change. The evening she beat Thatcher at chess for the first time, his delighted laugh echoing through the house. The morning Ruth asked her help with a difficult recipe, treating her as a daughter without question. The afternoon Samuel took her hand as they walked along the creek, a gesture both innocent and full of promise. One day, while organizing the barn, Clara found the old journal she'd started years ago. She read her early entries full of fear and anger and desperate hope. Then she turned to a fresh page and began to write. "Today marks 4 years since I came to this ranch. 4 years since I stopped being property and started being a person. The girl who wrote those first entries feels like a stranger now, though I carry her story in my bones. I am Clara Reed. I have a father who chose me and whom I chose in return. I have a mother in Ruth who shows me daily that family isn't just about blood. I have friends who value me for who I am, not what I can do for them. I have a young man who sees my strength as something to admire, not overcome. Most of all, I have a future, not the one my birth mother imagined. We lost that chance to cruelty and greed, but a future built on the foundation she laid with her love and sacrifice. Every choice I make honors her memory. Every day I live free proves her fight was not in vain." As she finished writing, Clara heard voices in the yard. Sheriff Danvers had arrived with the news the territorial government was passing new laws against child trafficking. Partly inspired by her case, her story had traveled far, inspiring others to speak out, to fight back. "You've made a difference," Danvers told her, "more than you know." That evening, as the sun set in its eternal blaze of glory, Clara stood on the porch of the home she'd helped build. The desert stretched endlessly before her, no longer a barrier, but a promise. Somewhere out there, other children were fighting to survive, to find their place, to become who they were meant to be. "What are you thinking?" Samuel asked. joining her. That every ending is also a beginning. Clara replied. That the girl who cried thrown out, just like Papa did, found something better than she ever imagined. And what's that? Clara smiled, gesturing to encompass the ranch, the people, the life they'd built together. A place to grow, a family to grow with, a future to grow into. The windmill turned its steady circle, marking time not in loss but in possibility. Inside the house, Ruth called them for dinner, her voice warm with affection. Thatcher's laugh rumbled in response to something she said. Jonah barked, eager for scraps and attention. Clara took Samuel's offered arm and turned toward the door, toward family, toward home. The red ribbon on her wrist caught the last light of day, bright as blood, bright as love, bright as the promise that no one who found their way to the Reed Ranch would ever be thrown away again. In the end, that was her truest victory, not just surviving, but creating a place where others could survive too, where children could be children, where families could be chosen, where love was stronger than law and kindness more powerful than cruelty. The desert wind sang its ancient song as Clara Reed stepped inside, closing the door gently on the past and opening her heart to all the tomorrows yet to come. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what this tale meant to you. If you enjoyed this journey through the American frontier, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit the like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more people discover this story. Your support means everything,